Hello everyone, it's Brian, and welcome back to Twilight Struggle Play the Experts, the game where I play the expert, and you wonder why on earth I ever thought that was a good idea. Now, last game, we started off playing Sankt, one of the most famous players in the game. He started with a huge and horrible surge into Asia, against which I took somewhat of a admitted risk and got immediately spanked with the Korean War. Then, to make matters worse, I forgot the DEFCON was 5, got utterly crushed in Italy, and turn 1 ended looking pretty darn grim for democracy. Now, turn 2 wasn't quite as unmitigated as a disaster. I did get couped back into Thailand with the China card. We had some various maneuverings. He did establish a full decolonization of Africa, but that brings us to turn 3 in the reshuffle, where we are going to have to try to turn things around a bit. But before we do that, I want to take you back in time, because this being, a learning series, I want to make sure that we fully appreciate my mistakes when I make them, because that's how we learn. And one of the awesome things about making this series for me is that I have found that there are a number of people watching this series that are better players than I am. And so they comment and they tell me things and they teach me things, and then I know them. And I propose to share them with you. So let's go back, first of all, to headline phase of turn 1. Or even really it's to the setup phase. Because I put 3 dudes, I'll call them. I've been scolded. I should really refer to them as influence points, but it really just out of my mouth comes the word dudes. We can argue about that. But I put 3 influence points in Italy and 3 in Iran. And that's what I've always come to think of was a pretty strong play when you have a 2-point handicap. And the reason is that protects Italy pretty well, but Iran, I'd come to understand, was so important for getting adjacent to Pakistan and Asia and so forth. And that's been fairly true in, play at my level in the high 1700s, low 1800s, that kind of level. Well, that's been a pretty good play. Apparently in the upper levels of truly groundbreaking Twilight Struggle thinking, players like Sankt have come to feel like Asia's a little less important than we all thought it was, and Europe's a little bit more important. And if they've got a 4 card, they are likely to just crash it into Italy in a situation like this, because that, first of all, prevents your, if you're successful, and it prevents your opponent from ever being able to dominate Europe, which otherwise they can. See, Europe, unlike Asia, has an odd number of battlegrounds, so it's not nearly as likely to stalemate, let's put it that way, as Asia. Asia's also easier to disrupt later with wars and with the China card. So that's one thing. Now, I could have safely used this setup if I had been willing to headline European unrest instead of nuclear test ban. So I wouldn't have gotten the 3 points, but I would have eliminated his little toucher over there in Australia, and that really changes the odds for the Soviet player, because that means that if he coups it down to 0, he won't be able to get into Italy on the next phase, and that makes it all just a lot less attractive for him. So if I had headlined Eastern European unrest, then I could have gone with the 3 in Iran. Otherwise, at the higher levels, they're saying, you should really go 4 in Italy and 2 in Iran. In terms of translating that into practical advice for a variety of levels of player, what I notice is that when I play players that are kind of more in the 1500s or under range, well, they coup Italy all the time. Like that's kind of when you're learning the game, you start coupping Italy a lot. And then people that are that are rated like 1600 to 1800s, they've all gone and read the, Twilight Strategy site, and they're all focused on Iran. And so, against those players, you might want to still, you could consider still going ahead and putting the extra point in Iran, because they're less likely to coup Italy, because that's the doctrine, and that's the doctrine we were all taught. That's a doctrine we grew up on. So, but then when you get up, if you want to get up to the higher levels, you want to ascend into the 1900s and above, a level to which I have not currently ascended myself, then one may wish to consider valuing Italy more. Now, if you're playing the Soviets, that means if you're looking at a 3-3, then, maybe you want to get back to pounding in a 4 card on turn 1 for a coup. I mean, it depends on the hand you got, right? There's hands that are good for going one way, and there's if you got a hand that's screaming Asia, well, then you're going to have to go Asia, right? But if you've got a hand that's friendly for Europe, maybe you've got control of Marshall Plan, so you can control when it goes off, and various things like that. And you got a bunch of ops. Well, that's when you go Italy. Just probably don't coup Italy with the China card, because there's still a lot of reason to hold the China card on turn 1. So that is my attempt to sum up some of the learnings there. And now let's jump a little bit forward, because there's one other thing that happened after. So he didn't actually coup Italy as it happened, because he had an even more crushing alternative in Asia. I don't feel too bad about my attempt to counterplay in South Korea. I mean, I took a risk and it didn't work. Twilight Struggle is a game of taking risks, mitigating risks, and so forth. So, but I want to go to the part where he played the China card and started filling up stuff in the Middle East. And this is the point you may recall that I picked up the Eastern European unrest and I took a big coup in Lebanon, and I will own Lebanon for a very long time as a result. However, this was when the DEFCON was 5, and everything was still kind of okay. I mean, I'm going to get dominated in Asia, but I did get the 3 points for the other thing. And Middle East is still stable. And the DEFCON's 5. There's plenty of time for me to coup Lebanon, but there's not much time for me to make the DEFCON stop being 5 before Italy goes plop. And so what I needed to do, I needed to pick up one of these cards, probably Eastern European Unrest, once again, and I needed to coup some battleground. Coupping was right, not coupping in a battleground was wrong. I should have either coupped Iraq or Thailand. Thailand, obviously, more likely to make a dent. He does have his straight to the teeth of his Vietnam Revolt +1 factor, but one way or the other, I should probably, looking at the board, go to Thailand, with the hindsight that he was sitting there holding the Middle East card and trying to get rid of it. Well, that would make me lean toward, if I knew that, I would probably be more likely to go ahead and take a stab at Iraq. But I would say on the whole, probably coup Thailand, but definitely coup something. And that would have prevented all of the horrible bloodshed that followed when he just crushed Italy, removing my chance to pretty much ever dominate Europe, meaning he's probably going to dominate Europe. I mean, just think about the difference in the scorecard based on this. From it was heading toward he was going to get 5 for Asia or 6 or something, and then I was going to get probably 5 for Europe, right? With just a little bit of care and feeding, I could probably score Europe. And, that's it. So probably we're looking at just a couple fewer points for me. I might even in turn 2 up a point or something. That's a lot better than what happened, right? So that is obviously, anytime you play, you stay at DEFCON 5, you need to just stay alert. And, to my opponent's credit, he got me out of my comfort zone with his extremely aggressive opening in Asia, which I might add, in some of my other games, I have begun to occasionally deploy that opening, and with great success. Although I haven't won the Korean War every time. But anyway, that being said, you can pick up a few little tricks from his toolkit as well as mine, and his are certainly some pretty awesome aggressive tricks. Now, that brings us back to Mighty Turn 3, and there has been some excellent discussion online about what my headline should be here. There's 2 or 3 main ways to go about this. Remembering that he's holding, one key card we know he's holding is socialist government. So, he's holding socialist governments. We're holding European scoring. He knows we're holding European scoring. So, one sort of holocaust that could confront us is a socialist government's headline, in which case he would remove probably 2 from West Germany and 1 from presumably France. But the main thing is suddenly we wouldn't even have a presence in Europe. So we certainly can't just hurl the European scoring card onto the flames of the headline, sometimes you just burn a card you don't want to have to play as one of your action rounds. But this would definitely not be that time. So let us eliminate the idea of headlining the European scoring card. There is also the possibility. Now, he doesn't know about some of these cards that we got in the redraw. Like, he doesn't know we have Middle East scoring, and he doesn't know about duck and cover and for motion resolution, I guess. So he doesn't know for sure how many ops we have. Now, you can look at those first 4 cards in our hand plus Europe and think, well, he doesn't have a lot of ops, and maybe he didn't redraw many good ops, and he could try to go for the full European Monty here. Headline socialist governments and just start splorbing in crud, and I'll be lucky to even have a presence in Europe, let alone the battleground. Is realistic chances of achieving control by the end of the turn? Low, but his chances of doing me a lot of harm on the VP scale and maybe making me soil my pants are, pretty reasonable. So that is something he might do. And so then the argument becomes, does one flee in fear from that possibility by headlining the Middle East, just getting it out of our hand at a sort of a 0, and then thereby preserving ops and action rounds that we don't have to play scorecards during in order to be able to defend Europe from the ultimate disaster? Or does one try to recover some on the scoreboard by headlining duck and cover, gaining 3 points, and preventing him from cooing? So maybe we don't even incur an ops penalty, so that may be even 2 more points, and then that gives us a chance to maybe do some harm with the Middle East. If we filled up Libya, we might, he's not really for sure knowing we have Middle East scoring. I mean, it could be, for all he knows, it could be coming up all the way on turn 7. So we might be able to just quietly put 2 points in Libya, dominate the Middle East. And so that is a lot of points, like 3 points from duck and cover, maybe 2 points from not losing 2 to ops, and like 3 more points for dominating the Middle East. Well, that makes up for a lot of, getting owned for 6 points in Europe or whatever it's going to be that comes up, 6 or 5 if I get hold of France. So that is my thinking there. Or those are the alternatives. And my thinking is that particularly when I'm down, when I'm behind, and believe me, you look at the scoreboard and the board, I'm behind. That's when it's time to play more risky, more aggressive, more offensive, and not defensive. So rather than, because, if I lose the game to European control, I still just lost the game. Plus, I get a fun little memory of when I got absolutely smeared to the wall by a top player. So there'd be some aesthetic value at least. Or I can actually try to put some points on the board and put some pressure on him and, make this thing go into the later rounds and try to survive until turn 10 final scoring. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to headline, duck, and cover. And let's see how that comes out. All right, he has eschewed the socialist government headline for reasons that we'll have to figure out. But he has done, captured Nazi scientists would certainly be the other card I might have expected from Sanct, because I know that among the Sanct style players, the Chinese strategy, that captured Nazi scientist is generally considered, quote unquote, locked for the event, that they will never, ever, if they have any possible choice, let this card pass through their hands without playing it for the event, because one-op versus progress on the space track and denying progress on the space track to their opponent later is considered super, super valuable in these top levels. And, I've talked a lot about the space track, and we'll talk about the space track again, but I just put a little asterisk here that this is a signature Sanct kind of play, is to pop this bad boy out for the event. So he could have done it later in the turn, but he's doing it in headline phase, and that's a perfectly fine time for him to do it. So he's going to, first we are going to get our 3 points for duck and cover, and DEFCON goes to 2. Wah, wah. And then captured Nazi scientist gets all captured and stuff, and he gets his point for that on the space track. And we go to his action round 1. What is he doing? And here, socialist governments for influence. See, he has got other fish to fry. And that's interesting, because he knows we got Europe, but I guess he's thinking that he's got as much Europe as he needs. Because the thing is, getting the third battleground in Europe is worth a crap ton of points. It's worth, first of all, preventing your opponent from scoring the 5 points of domination, and it's allowing you to possibly score the 5 points of domination. And so that can be as much as a 10-point swing, and in this case, yeah. So, whereas getting the fourth, he could easily have, surely he could have grabbed France from me against my helpless cries if he'd wanted to. But when you think about it, that one's worth maybe 2 points. So it's weird. The third one's worth 5 to 10 points. The fourth battleground's worth like 2. And then the fifth battleground is kind of the game, right? So there's this funny discontinuity in the value of having 3, 4, or 5, or 2, 3, 4, or 5 battlegrounds, because 2 is kind of bad, and 3 is really good, and 4 is like, and 5 is like, So I think he has kind of made a risk management decision that expending a lot of resources to try to get a fourth thing, not so much. And I guess he didn't feel like, expending the resources to deny me a presence would have been worth it. I mean, if he could have done it, it would have been worth it, because that's 3 more points and 1 for me not being in West Germany. So that's 4 points. It gets gruesome, but I think he probably thought he couldn't count on denying me. We don't know his whole hand either. And he probably felt like he couldn't count on absolutely denying me a presence. Remember, he's got de-Stalinization he's going to need to get done. Things he wants. He might have other cards he needs to play for the event for whatever reason. I mean, obviously, capture Nazi scientists. He's going to play for the event. He did. So he's gone with the 3 influence from that and is he's calling Europe good enough. He's just gonna look at me, laugh, and wait for me to score it. Okay, so that brings us to, well, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to try to work on my agenda. I need to go get India filled up, even though my real goal is to score Libya. I need to fill India up because he's touching it, and I really need to establish a pretty firm domination of Asia to counter his domination of Europe, I feel like. So that'll at least keep those battlegrounds okay, give us a fighting chance on the scoreboard to continue to survive. So I need to not let him just cruise into India, and that's what we're doing. Okay, so yes, I walk into another one of his wars. There's the Indo-Paki War. He needs a 5 or a 6 to do it, and oh, well, this time he rolled a 1 instead of a 6. So that's good. We had a 2/3 chance to survive in that war. So see, sometimes you just feel like you have to walk into war, and sometimes you'll survive those wars. I'd probably rather have survived the first one, but we survived this one, and now our domination of Asia is at least momentarily secure. So that leads us to, now he did get ops, so, that's the thing. I was certainly hoping that maybe he would not get ops. Did I know he had the Indo-Paki War? Anyway, there's lots of war cards for the Soviets to get ops, and so sometimes they can, and we're just going to have to eat those 2 ops. So we didn't get those 2 points back. However, why don't we continue our little move into Libya, which looks pretty innocent at this point, just filling up basically the one little flopping battleground we can. And let's see what he does. Okay, yes, he's getting his business done. He's de-Stalinizing. He's so confident in Europe, he doesn't feel like he needs any of those Austrian points, and he's just pulling them out. And that's an interesting de-Stalinize. I'm often more of a mind, and perhaps this is again because of my training, to just fill up South America to ensure that I will survive an early voice of America down there. But he's going this is pretty aggressive. Look at that. He's in Mexico, he's in Panama, so he's going to both continents, and I'm going to take that as a piece of advice from an extremely high-rated player that perhaps I should reconsider the value of de-Stalinizing into both continents. And so you guys can expect me to be doing that to you soon. Or you can do it to me and I'll say, cool. All right, so he did that. He de-Stalinized in a freakishly aggressive way, and we are not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. We are going to get our 3 points. So there we are. Look at that. Blue numbers on the scoring board for a very, very short time, but we'll enjoy it for a very short time while we have it. All right, so what's he got? He's got Eastern European unrest for influence, and he's going to continue his spread there. Yes, that is unsurprising. We now just make a meaningless removal of items from Eastern Europe. He's so safe, he just doesn't have to worry about that. And I think it's time for some last-ditch realignments. This is probably my last chance before he spreads so far out into South America and Central America that I'm, risking him getting total control of each. So let's do some realignments and see if we can curtail his spread. This, by the way, is, this isn't like super sanct level rocket scientist, but it is good, solid play. This is something I don't see enough 1500 and 1600 players doing, is when the Soviets get their first little delicate communists in there and they're not touching as much stuff, then realign them quick, and sometimes miracles will occur and they will be repressed. So our top target this turn is Mexico, because our superpower gets to touch back. And that means that we would realign at an even odds, or an even die roll. No die roll modifiers. He gets +1 for having more guys in Mexico. We get +1 for having a touching superpower. And the next target would be Chile, which we realign at -1, but if we get him out, he doesn't have a toucher to get back in down there. So, and then, if we just hit the jackpot, we would then start looking at, I don't know. On the one hand, both Venezuela and Brazil, he did expand last turn. So they're both still at -1 and they have touchers on each other. Pakistan has no touchers, but we've got skin in the game, as I would say, that we could actually lose our one little dude down there. Which would I realign? Well, just because it's more aggressive, I'd probably do Panama. But anyway, let's see if we get there. We've got our plan, and we're sticking to it. So, realign Mexico. 41% chance of success. Nothing. Okay, let's realign Mexico. 41.7% chance of success. Nothing. So, anyway, realign Mexico. 41.7% chance of success. And, okay, we got something for that. Sometimes you're going to get nothing for that. You're going to realign, I've seen people realign with the China card at 0 like 4 times and get absolutely nothing for it. But don't let that stop you from trying realignments. And try realignments in places where especially the enemy doesn't have any way to get back in if the realignment succeeds. That can make doing -1, or even sometimes, if you're desperate enough, -2 realignments worth just going ahead and pounding out in the hope. All right, so here comes a China card. That's always a foreboding thing. All right, so he has said, okay, he is pulling up the drawbridge and throwing out the key and stuff in South America. He wants to be fully in, and that is why I did realignments last turn, because I figured there weren't going to be many more chances. So that's fine. What are we at? We're in action round 5, and that means if I want to have an action round 6 play, then I'd have to play Europe now. But I don't see a lot of great action round 6 plays coming. And I think what I really want to do is just recover a point here, plus, just keep Europe a little bit less on the brink of total catastrophe. We've both he and I have been sort of eschewing that, he doesn't care as much about his 4th as he did about his 3rd, and I don't care much about my 2nd as I do about my 1st and my 3rd battleground in Europe. But I'm going to go ahead and take it, save a point here and there. I'm points greedy. I've admitted it. I say it out loud many times. Okay, Nasser for influence. So that's just a little fact, which is he's decided, and this is something I certainly do, if I don't really need to be back in Egypt with Nasser right now, look at it. It gets in there. I've already kind of got the upper hand of that area. It's not like he's going to get access to Libya or whatever. And this way, he maintains the threat later. Sometimes Nasser comes up after Sadat, and that's kind of awkward. It keeps his hand in the game in Egypt for a lot longer, and of course, it gives me the possibility of getting stuck with a horrible one-ops Soviet card that Nasser is later. So, yeah, if Nasser isn't really of any value, again, Middle East doesn't score till at least turn 7 now, then yeah, shuffle it back in. Try to send him to after Nasser. So now we have to give him our 5 points, and that is just what we had to give him. And we go to turn 4. Turn 4 with him up 5 points and the board looking pretty dire. So let's look at our cards here. We have got a number of his cards, but so Brezhnev Doctrine is a card we can play on our very last round, and he won't get any +1s for it because we move after him, and then the turn ends, and then its effect is over. So that's a great card for the very end if I don't feel the strong need to make some kind of action round 6 play. 7 play 6. 6. Seven. It's turn 4, not turn 3, even though you look down and what you see is turn 3 at the very bottom. Then you see turn 4. So, there's liberation theology. Good God, that's going to space. Just has to go to space. And if I get a second chance at space, which, I may well if he doesn't get around to spacing or if he fails, then the next thing to go to space is probably South African unrest, which would put the final nail in our coffin in Southern Africa. So we don't want to, those want to go to space or possibly hold one if we don't get to do 2 spaces. Flower power will probably haunt our dreams for a long time if we play it, but I think we're just going to have to suck it up and take the ops because everything else is worse. Now, then there's some cards we have. Well, NORAD is one of our highest ops cards we have available to play for ops, and we're not very well situated in Canada, and we haven't had a Marshall Plan. He didn't have to special relationships a point. It would be a pretty big climb to get NORAD going, and then he might well just quagmire us next turn. So it's probably going to be ops. Nixon plays a China card for 2 points. Yeah, I'm probably playing that for 2 points because points are points. Panama Canal return would be a chance to try to poke back into Venezuela. So some of you may think that I should go ahead and do Brezhnev on action round 6 and then play Panama on turn 7. And maybe that's true. Maybe it's not true. I have to kind of gauge my chances of him actually letting that be meaningful at the end of the turn. But I think that overall is that, everything else in the hand looks pretty much like ops, and we probably just hold on to the China card for now. There aren't any gruesomely exciting China card playing type opportunities coming up. So, headline-wise, I think our best headline is probably Nixon for 2 points. Just we know we want the 2 points, let's just take them. What's he got? All right, he's got Southeast Asia scoring, and that's going to score us, a point? Yeah, so, we just got 3 total points back. So what he's seeing there is he doesn't think Southeast Asia scoring is likely to get better for him. In fact, it looks like it could easily get a lot worse, or at least a little bit worse. And he also realizes that defectors is in the mix. I might defector him. And so if he's planning to just blow this thing out of his hand, he might as well do it, A, in headline phase when it doesn't take up an action round, and B, hey, I might defector it because it's a slightly unfavorable scoring card. It turned out I didn't defector it, but he was perfectly happy to just get that permanently out of the deck without having to have a giant land war in Southeast Asia. So, in comes his coup, and he's gonna coup, unsurprisingly, Algeria. Oh, and he's gonna roll a 6. That's too bad, but 6s do sometimes happen. Yep, it's not great. So that's bad for our European prospects. And so that pretty much settles me on what that flower power is definitely being played and where it's being played, which is I need to desperately try to not get nothing in Africa. And so I'm going to fill up South Africa to control. Happily, I know where the South African unrest card is, and I'm either going to hold it or space it. And I'm going to stick a prod over into Botswana so that it's not it's a little more expensive for him to try to grab it and start horrible realignments. And if he does do realignments, then I can kind of be leaking back in if he's, from Botswana. So that makes realignments also less attractive. And he's got skin in the game, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just going to try to discourage him from driving me out of South Africa because I would I don't really want him to score 6 points in Africa, but I'd much rather him not score, 10 or 11 points in Africa, which would be catastrophic. So we're trying to not get nothing in Africa, and that 6 did not help us at all. So he doesn't need Portuguese as Portuguese anymore. He's going to play him for influence, finishing his little filling up and over-controlling projects in various places. Look how solid and horrible he is in South America. So I just don't think he's going to. I'm just going to go ahead and burn Panama now. I don't think he's going to let me have much of a chance on it, and I'm just going to save. I want my last round play to have some more ops to it. So, we can always break his control with Brezhnev somewhere. So I'm just going to keep my powder dry on that and do that. So Che for ops, and he fills it back up, so that's good for him. We are going to space liberation theology and success. Whee! 2 more points. Oh my goodness. The score is even. And that is a fortunate and happy thing. I would not say the position is even, but at least we're not getting, what do they call it? Shut out. We're not cruising toward a 20-point auto victory for a while. It's looking more like a slow, gradual defeat. And at this point, I am afraid that a really, really sad thing happened, and that is this. My opponent kind of disappeared and ran out of time, and I have no idea what happened. It was a 45-day time control, but he's in China. In like 11-hour time difference or something, equally horrible. I tried to reach out. I told him, I could let the clock run on my time, or we could try to, but I wasn't able to get in contact with him, and I kind of watched over the last 3 weeks as very sadly his time ran out. So I don't know what happened. I really would have liked to finish this game and let him crush me in the way he deserved to crush me. I will try to get back in touch with him and arrange some kind of rematch if it's possible. Again, I'm not sure what happened yet. I haven't heard anything. It's been 3 or 4 weeks. But, he's in a distant foreign land from me, and I'm just going to have to hope that I get back in touch with him. Meanwhile, in spite of my inglorious quote-unquote victory, I think that I have learned many valuable things, and I hope you have learned them too. I feel like this has been very much a worthy game to post, and it kind of proves the value of this play the experts thing, because there's a lot of stuff. Let's go back and let's just kind of do a little post-mortem at the end on what this looks like. So it looks like I'm going to successfully dominate Asia. He has dealt with the Southeast Asia problem, and I have a bit of an issue with Thailand if he draws the brush war card, because right now he'd have a 2/3 chance of taking it. And the sad thing is, I was hoping that during the fight for Southeast Asia, I would get Malaysia. It would be worth my time for scoring to get Malaysia and maybe even Laos, Cambodia, and then maybe I would survive a brush war. But right now I'm sitting kind of naked to the brush war. Obviously, if I draw the brush war, then I'm kind of looking at, right now, probably Italy, unless I feel like I really need to get back into, it would depend on when I got it, whether I was looking at Italy or South America as the most existential threat. But, right now he's on course to get 8 or 10 points in South America. It doesn't look like he's got the card this turn, because he would have scored it by now for 10. But so hopefully I can get in and at least have a presence somewhere for the 2 points and have him merely get 8. We realigned him out of Mexico, which lowers the threat of having him control Central America. Fidel is still out there, so it'll come. He'll probably dominate Central America. He's going to have a big domination in Africa, at least. We, ironically, have a good position in the Middle East, but Muslim Revolution is out there. Nasser's still in there. There's stuff. We can't count on the Middle East for a lot of points. It doesn't look right now like it's cruising toward a massive point factory for him. But, if he gets OPEC, he's still got 3, with Venezuela, he's still got 3 points worth of OPEC in there. It's not bad. And then, in Europe, he's got us fairly well dominated and the scoring card is done. What happens in the late war? Well, we might be able to escape from the domination with some of those superpower cards, but on the whole, the scoreboard looks kind of, I'd score it as South America, let's just call it 10 for him. Africa, 6. It's going to be 6 for him once he doesn't have Battleground, but he could score easily 6 for that. Now, Asia's actually in the Middle War mix, so we could hope I score 5 for that. So that's like -11. And then Central America goes one. But yeah, it's looking like we're going to kind of come through the mid-war, and he has a very good chance of being up some low double-digit number of points going into the late war. And then in late war, if I don't turn it around, then he's just gonna roll me. Is this game absolutely lost positionally? No. I mean, things could happen, and the scoreboard is even. So that means, I'm not going into this with an immediate deficit. I'm just going to probably incur one real soon. So it could be worse. It's not lost, but he'd probably, among even players, I would much rather be him than me, in even leaving aside being better at it. So that's where we'll leave the position. I'm certainly not going to call this a four-peat. This is a completely technical, this is really just a technical and scheduling glitch, and, it's going to just go down as a little asterisk in the history of Twilight Struggle Play the Experts. But it has been an honor to play one of the best players in the game and be truly schooled by him. And I will hope to get another rematch going soon. Meanwhile, I've got my tournament game on quarter to 3 going that is already started as Series 4 game, Tournament Game 4. And so you can watch me play the finals in an actual tournament against, in this case, an opponent that's rated about the same as me. But I figure if he earned his way to the finals, then that's kind of a different take on expert play. And so enjoy the melodious sounds of the Russian national anthem. And we'll see you next time on Twilight Struggle Play the Experts.